Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January California, Nevada Drought and Climate Outlook Webinar. Thank you for those that have joined us previously and those that may be joining us for the first time. My name is Amanda Sheffield, and I am the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System for California and Nevada. This bi-monthly webinar series is designed to provide the region with timely information on current drought status and associated impacts, as well as a preview of developing climatic events. This webinar is co-hosted with the California Nevada Applications Program and NOAA RESA team. As a heads up, this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on drought.gov and our YouTube channel later this week. Before we get started on our great presentations today, which will include the update and outlook for current conditions and what's coming ahead, as well as a preview of or a showcase of the new drought.gov and the information it can provide listeners such as you all. But before we get started, for those that don't know about NIDIS, I just want to give a brief overview. NIDIS's mission is to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risk. So we want to provide the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. Our approach to achieve this goal is to build a foundation of a national drought early warning system through the development of regional DEWS or drought early warning systems, where networks of partners and stakeholders work to share information and actions that help communities cope with drought. Many of these activities, including those in the California Nevada DEWS, across these 5 different areas, including observation and monitoring, prediction and forecasting, planning and preparedness, interdisciplinary research, and communication outreach, such as webinars like this. We work with new and existing partners to make information available and understandable to help our region plan for and cope with the impacts of drought. And with that, I'll go ahead and get to the great presentations that we have today. First up is the Drought and Climate Update and Outlook. Julie Kalinsky from CNAP, the California Nevada Applications Program at Scripps, UC San Diego, will be giving the Drought Update and Outlook. Julie, I'll pass control over to you.
Great.
1 second, and here we go.
We're good to go. Everybody can see the screen? Great. So as Amanda said, I will be doing the update and outlook. And so one thing, and probably the most important thing, is that we are in a drought. And so here is the current drought monitor conditions. So if you see here in California, and here's Nevada, excuse me. And in California, about 5% is abnormally dry, 16% is in moderate drought, 38% is in severe drought, 39% in extreme drought, and about 1% in exceptional drought. The drought conditions throughout Nevada are more severe, with about 8% in moderate drought, 19% in severe drought, and almost 50% in extreme drought, and about 25% in exceptional drought. And so one of the questions is, about a year ago, there was no drought in our region, and now there is significant drought. And so how do we go from no drought to drought? And that's what I'll be covering in the first part of this presentation. And so this is looking at water year 2020. This is the percent of normal water year precipitation. A water year starts in October and goes through September, so it catches the full water season. So the winter, wet winter, and in some of our more southern regions, sometimes the summer monsoon. And so besides Southern California and the very most southeastern parts of Nevada, the rest of the region was relatively dry last year, with receiving less than 70% of normal precipitation. And then this year, the drought has been more severe, with up to date, most of the region has received 50% or less, with some parts in southern Nevada and southeastern California has received 10% less of normal precipitation. So it's been this year, so thus far, and this was as of last Thursday, I believe, it's been extremely, extremely dry in our region this year. And so if we're looking at the deficit, areas in Northern California, some of the wetter areas in our region have a deficit as much as 50 inches thus far since the last water year. And another way to look at this is how many water years is the deficit. And so throughout our region, if you think about how much water normally falls during the last 2 water years, this is how many water years it would take to normally to alleviate that deficit. So as you can see, a lot of the region is between 1 and 1.5 water years in deficit. So there's quite a bit of precipitation missing over the last 2 years. And though we have, about a little less than 3/4 of the year to go, much of the precipitation that falls in our region falls between November and April. And so we don't have that much longer to go in the traditional wet season for much of our region to make up this 2-year deficit. No, but it wasn't just a precipitation deficit, it was also an evaporative demand. And so what you're looking at here is what is called EDI. It's the Evaporative Drought Demand Index. And so what this is, it's the atmospheric thirst for water. And so you can think of it as how much, if there was as much water there, how much water would evaporate and transpire into the atmosphere. And so the figure on the left is over the last 6 months, and the figure on the right is just over the last month. And so these red areas, you can see throughout much of our region, the evaporative demand was very, very extreme. And so not only did we receive, for much of the region, less than normal precipitation over the last water year during the summer because of the really high temperatures, and that it's also winds and humidity and solar radiation, that a lot of that water that was in the land has been lost to the atmosphere. More recently, it hasn't been, the evaporative demand over the last month hasn't been quite as strong, except, in parts of our southern region where you still see quite a bit of evaporative demand. And so not only is this precipitation deficit, but there's also this evaporative demand deficit, which is contributing to the current drought. And so just looking at this for this year, when we think about drought, it's important to mention temperature. Thus far this water year, we've been slightly warmer throughout the entire region. So between, most of the region is about 2 to 4 degrees warmer than normal, with other parts, slightly less. And then the other impact of this is not only the lack of precipitation, but then the lack of snow throughout our region. And so this is looking at different stations from the California Nevada River Forecast Center. And at those stations, it's reading the percentage of snow water equivalent, the percent of normal year to date. So normally, if you took the average at this point in time, what percent, how does what we have now compare to that would normally have occurred or normally have at this point in time in other years. And so much of the southern Sierras here in Las Vegas, or in Clark County and other regions, the snow water equivalent amount of water in that snow is much below normal, between 30 to 40%. Some of the more northern locations, it's not quite as bad, but it's still much below normal, between 50 and 70%. And so not only we're missing that precipitation, but because we haven't received that precipitation, there's also not the snow in our region. And so in addition to, or in the combination between the lack of precipitation and the high evaporative demand, this is looking at soil moisture throughout California, Nevada. And so what you see here in both these locations, or both these maps, it's a modeled soil moisture. So it's using a hydrologic model. It's taking a whole bunch of different atmospheric variables and it's putting them through to a model to look at soil moisture. And so it's helpful to show two different models because there are differences models to model. So one model here on the left is called VIC. The model on the right is a NOAA MP. It's part of the National Water Center, National Water Model. And so you can see between these two models, there are some differences, but overall, what is clear is that soil moistures are drier than normal. They're in, anywhere, much of the region to at least moderate drought to all the way exceptional drought in terms of how dry the soils are. And we can see the agreement between the models, through northern coastal California and into kind of central Nevada. They're both agreeing that those are the driest areas, although there are differences between the two models. And then one thing I will add, when you see the agreement between the two models, there's more certainty that this is, the soil moisture conditions in these regions. So with that, this is looking at Veg-DRI, which is an indication of the vegetation conditions. So the combination of the lack of precipitation with a high evaporative demand and the low soil moistures have led for certain areas throughout the state for the vegetation conditions to also show drought. And so again, as you see throughout much of California, they're moderate to severe drought, and in southern Nevada, parts of Clark County and a bit farther north, you're seeing some extreme drought impacting the vegetation conditions. So what does this mean in terms of water supply? And so this is a figure that Mike Dedinger has put together. And so what it's looking at is all these little dots represent different reservoirs throughout California. And this blue is where reservoirs normally are for this time of year. And then it's the snowpack. And so often in California, Nevada, our snowpack is a natural reservoir that can hold water. And so the red line is where thus far where the reservoirs are, and the orange line is the snowpack. And so normally for about this time of year, we would be up here around 20 million of acre feet. And right now we're at about 10. And the reservoir is obviously below normal, but the snowpack is this significant part of the reason why we're below normal. So this is the same sort of figure looking at the snowpack around Lake Tahoe and the storage within Lake Tahoe. So at the beginning of the water year, the storage within Lake Tahoe was well above normal. It's been slowly decreasing throughout the start of the water year. And then here you can see the snowpack, some early storms, but it's still pretty minimal, and we're a bit below normal when you take in the lake storage and the snowpack for Lake Tahoe. And then in talking about reservoirs, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Colorado River Basin, as it's very important to our region. And so if you look for the Colorado River, this is the snowpack, the snow water equivalent, the amount of water in the snow, the percent of normal for April 1st, excuse me. And most of the larger watersheds are between 50 and 80%, so well below normal. And then, the lower watershed is doing a bit better. But overall, the Colorado River Basin is about 70% of normal. And then this is looking at the two largest reservoirs that are part of the Colorado River. So Lake Powell is about 2.5 million acre feet less in storage this year as compared to this time last year. So you can see the difference here and here. And then Lake Mead is not quite, it's about 670,000 acre feet less. So there's not quite as much big of a difference between this time last year and this year. And the other big story in terms of climate and weather this year is the ongoing La Niña. And so this is looking at sea surface temperatures, which is often how La Niña is diagnosed. And so on average, the El Nino region, it's called El Nino 3.4, which is in the Central Pacific here, is about 1.1 degrees Celsius cooler than normal, which is indicative of a La Niña conditions. And forecasts have a 90% chance of La Niña conditions continuing, through March. And so we're very much in kind of a traditional or La Niña phase. So that's a summary of kind of where the current conditions are. And so this is, if we had that crystal ball, I think what everybody's asking, given that we're, over halfway through the very, the wettest season of in California, Nevada, will the drought get better? And if so, how much? And this is really the big question. And we're very much working on looking at longer timescale forecasts, so that's sub-seasonal from 2 weeks, 2 months, but there's still not a lot of skill out there. So one way to look at this is looking at the historical odds. And so if you take in all the past years, how likely is it based on those that will reach normal precipitation? And so this is, again, something that Mike Dedinger has put together, is on the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes website, looking at the odds of reaching normal precipitation. And this was as of January 1st. And so, given that January for much of the region until recently has been very dry, these odds will change, and the next update comes February 5th. But throughout much of the region, the odds of reaching normal precipitation for this year is about 30% or less. There's some areas that are a bit less, but in some areas that are a bit more, but throughout the region as a whole, about 30% or less odds based on historical amounts of precipitation that we've gotten from January through the end of the water year. Now, if you take this and take into account the past water year, so water year 2020 and this water year, the odds are, even less. And so for much of the region in Nevada and California, the odds of reaching 100% of normal for those past 2 years are extremely unlikely, just because the previous year was dry. In the southern region, there's a bit more of a chance, in part because it doesn't take quite as much as precipitation to reach the normal, and also that parts of those regions were a bit wetter last year. If over those 2 years, we have, a bit better of a chance of reaching 75% of normal, and it's likely over those 2 years we'll reach at least 50% of normal. So it kind of went backwards. But this is, thinking of taking into account the previous dry year, which can impact drought. It's those odds of making up completely from last year historically are very, very slim. So now what about the recent precipitation? So parts of, Southern California and parts of this is the 8-station index, which is in the Northern Sierras, and important region for water supply. And this is in the region, or Reno, Carson City region. And so we're starting to see a bit, over the past couple of days, there's been a little bit of precip in the region. And so it's at about 1.16% of normal precip in the 8-station index, but we're still well below normal, which is this blue dashed line. And same thing for the Reno Carson City area. It's added, just under 1.5%, but we're still well below normal of what we would be generally for this time of year. So some other locations that have had some recent precip in the past couple of days, San Diego has had just over 2%, Los Angeles over 2.5%, and Clark County about 1% over the last 3-day change. So you can also, there's other regions that you can track. Here's the website if you want to see how recent storms have impacted, kind of the region's chances of getting overall precip. And so what about this on social media and in the news, I've probably heard a bit about this incoming atmospheric river, which is the type of storm that brings moisture, that often will bring moisture into California and then into Nevada. And so with this incoming atmospheric river, over the next 7 days, there's anticipation of about 6 inches throughout much of the region, with the Sierras getting about 10 inches and some significant snowfall forecast for the region. And so this storm coming in will help provide some drought mitigation and will help with the large deficit that we have. And then is there another storm? And so what you're looking at here, it's called an atmospheric river landfall tool. And so the different weather models will make an ensemble. And so they'll run multiple different times. And of all these different runs, this is showing the number of the colors here are showing the number of runs that are showing atmospheric river conditions. So conditions that would bring precipitation into our region. And so, this is a storm that I just showed the precipitation forecast for, and it looks like that, early into next week, there's a chance for another atmospheric river to bring precipitation into the region. And the fact that we're seeing some of these warmer colors, they're higher odds, meaning more of the ensemble members, more of the individual forecast are showing that they're going to be these atmospheric river conditions into next week. And so in terms of precipitation, again, this is pretty far out for a precipitation forecast, but estimating in some of the Sierra regions another 5 to 6 inches, throughout other parts of California, 2 to 3 inches, in Nevada, parts about an inch. And so we are looking to get some drought reprieve in the next couple of weeks. So, but what about beyond early February? And so what you're looking at this at, there are different forecast models that produce extended range, so month forecast. And each of these different boxes are showing the anomaly, so how much more or less precipitation are these different forecast products over the next month anticipating. And this one here is if you average these 5 boxes together, this is what would come out. And the idea of this is if, for example, all models are showing a similar trend, that's an indication that, that's more likely to happen. The fact that, 3 of the 5 models are showing slightly wetter to just normal, whereas other ones are showing slightly drier is an indication that there's a lot of uncertainty in this extended range, and so it's not very clear what will happen beyond the next 2 weeks. And then if we go even farther, this is the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center's 3-month forecast for February, March, and April. And so this is just showing the probability of being below normal. And what we can see for most of our region, there's a 30 to 40 to 50% chance of being below normal, whereas in the northern part of the region, it's pretty much equal chances of being dry or wet. And I would say this is very much kind of a traditional La Niña forecast. And so my intuition would be that that's why it's looking drier in the southern parts of our region. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're very much in drought conditions. And in terms of, how in the next couple of weeks, this is looking at the 2-week precipitation forecast, we are anticipating getting some precipitation into the region, but we're building off a dry water year 2020 for most of the region. This year thus far has been exceptionally dry, with this very high evaporative demand. So a lot of moisture has been lost throughout the last 6 months, and dry soil moisture. So putting all these together, if I had a crystal ball, my crystal ball would say is that we're likely to get some drought reprieve in the next couple of weeks, and even possibly farther, but it's still very likely that we will be in a drought going out of our main wet season, just because we have such a big hole currently. So Amanda, that's all I have in terms of the outlook and update, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Julie. I was going through the questions. I think some of these you hit along the way. There were questions about how the recent storms would improve conditions much, but I think you hit on that, and what La Niña typically, really what it means, and you mentioned that at the end. There is one question that's from the beginning. It's sort of how, I think you maybe was asking, when can we expect snowpack data to be updated based on the current snow events? If you could give any insight of how some of this data is updated, or timing, or things like that people might be interested.
In terms of, so in terms of getting updates, so I think the California Nevada River Forecast Center is probably your best resource to get updates. The one downside is if it doesn't extend all the way out, so it misses some of the mountain ranges in southern Nevada. But so if you go to this website and then if you scroll down, there's snow data. And you can see they have a lot of different, for example, SWE, you can get the update. This is actually where I got the, so you can see the current SWE, you can see it relative to April 1st. You can see the snow depth, you can see the 1 day or 5 day change. And so if we just look at the 5 day change, I realize this is probably super small on your screens, but you can see that it's 10.4, and I believe these are in inches. So I would recommend, if you want to see these as these storms are coming through, the CNRFC is really a great resource to be able to see some of these changes. We can see these changes here in Nevada as well.
Great. And I'll mention that for the areas that I believe aren't covered by the California Nevada River Forecast Center, are covered by the Colorado River Basin Forecast Center. I believe it's one of the other river forecast centers. So they have sites similar to this for the areas that don't cover quite this basin as well. And then I'll just add too is that, so Julie obviously included a lot of the links at the bottom of her slides. If you rewatch them, you'll be able to go straight to the websites. But many of them are also on the newdrought.gov, which will be the website we'll be showing you in the next presentation, where you can go to the snow or snow drought pages to go for specifically snow information. One last question, Julie, that came in is, what year in the past does this pattern most represent? So I'm thinking they're guessing analog, sort of comparable to this year.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head. It was something that I was looking at. I was thinking about last night, and I just I don't have that answer in terms of how thus far this year has compared. I think, thinking about it, the recent memory of the 2012 to 2016 drought, and thinking about how these last 2 years are similar to potentially any period within there would be helpful, but I don't have that specific, number on the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. One last question came in, and this one I actually don't think we're going to have a good answer for. Is, do we have high resolution data of snow melt?
For snow melt, no, that I think the best we can do is the changes in the snow water equivalent. So that's an indication of snow melt. So back to the California River forecast page, you can see the 1 day change. And so if, for example, if we get warm weather and you'd see a change, I think that would be one indication of it. But I don't know of other places where you can get the kind of near real-time data of snow melts.
Thank you, Julie. I think for time, we'll go on to the next presenter, and we'll come back to some questions at the end if we have some time. So next up, we're going to show you the new drought.gov. It recently launched after many years of being updated and user requests and information and lots of input. And Kelsey will be presenting on it. She is the lead for drought.gov from our NIDIS program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Satolino. As Amanda just mentioned, I'm the Digital Communications Coordinator with NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System. And today I'm excited to take the next few minutes to tell you and show you the redesigned US Drought Portal, or drought.gov. So a couple of weeks ago, we announced the launch of this redesigned website. The new site features updated content and new interactive architecture designed to make it really easy to access and share drought information, including drought conditions, forecasts, and impacts from the city, county, and state level to across the globe. So over the next few minutes, I want to take some time to walk you through 3 key new features of the website, and then I hope you'll take some time to explore the new site for yourself. So the first new feature of drought.gov that I want to talk about is the ability to view local drought information at a higher resolution down to the city and county level. Secondly, I will talk about the interactive data and maps throughout the website, trying to show drought in new ways and showcasing products and data from different sources. And you'll see a lot of familiar maps from Julie's presentation. And then finally, our brand new by sector section, which shows how drought is interacting with different sectors of the economy, such as agriculture, water utilities, wildfire management, and more. So the first new feature of the redesigned drought.gov is the ability to view drought conditions at a really high resolution. So on this new website, you can type in your city or zip code and go directly to a page with up-to-date drought conditions, impacts, and forecasts for your city or county. These maps are updated automatically. Most of them are interactive. As you can see here, we've got some precipitation and temperature information for Reno that you can mouse over to see what the temperature was on a given date and also how that compares to the last week and the last month. These pages also contain information on key drought indicators, drought blends, future conditions. You'll notice the evaporative demand map that Julie talked about, showing the thirst of the atmosphere, drought outlooks from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. These maps are interactive. You can zoom in or out and quickly select a different county to jump to drought conditions for that county. And finally, each of these pages also contains historical conditions at the county level. I won't go into so much depth here because I want to talk about our historical data and information page in just a moment. But I want to show you again how interactive we've tried to make this information, to make it really easy to find exactly what you need for your specific geographic region. So you can easily toggle between 3 different historical drought data sets with different periods of record, zoom in on a specific time period to view it in more detail. You can mouse over a specific drought value to isolate that value to visualize it better. And you can download an image of the panel as well as download the data in several different formats. I'll go ahead and jump up to the county level. We have one of these location pages for every county in the US. These pages contain a lot of the same automatically updated drought information that the city pages do, with a few additions. Throughout the website, you'll see these blue boxes with quick statistics on current drought conditions and often comparing those conditions to past conditions. So for example, 2020 was the 6th driest year to date in the past 127 years for this county. These county pages contain temperature and precipitation and US drought monitor information, blends, and unlike the city pages, they also contain maps showing droughts impacts on economic sectors. And this is a theme you'll see throughout the new website. You can see crop and livestock information overlaid on the current US drought monitor, showing droughts impacts on agriculture, impacts on water supply, showing USGS stream flow gauges. And you can click on one of these stream gauges to go to the US Geological Survey website to look at information for that particular stream gauge in more detail, and also public health impacts. I'm not going to show you every piece of the by location section, but I want to give you kind of a brief overview. So you can zoom out from the city and county level to view drought conditions by state. So for example, we'll jump to our California state page. You'll notice at the top of each of these pages, we have this button to report drought impacts. We have these prominently throughout the website, and they all link to the Seymour Drought Survey. So we're really trying to encourage people to report drought impacts at their local level, whatever geographic scale that you are concerned with or working with. Each of these state pages, in addition to allowing users to easily report drought impacts, has current US drought monitor conditions, again with interactive maps, historical conditions at the state level instead of the county level, upcoming events that are relevant to that state. You'll notice the next California, Nevada Drought and Climate Outlook webinar is on here. Documents and publications on drought.gov related to that state, as well as a curated list of web resources and regional partners for that state. So we've tried to make this a really helpful landing page to view drought conditions at whatever region that you personally are working with. And it's really easy to jump down to a more granular level or jump out to the regional level. The final location page I want to show you all is one of our drought early warning system pages. So this is our California, Nevada DEWS page. And each of these DEWS pages contains a brief overview of drought conditions in that region, as well as a link to the strategic plan for that region from NIDIS and the latest drought status update, the most recent of which was published on January 21st for California and Nevada, and that is on our website, and some of you may have received that via email as well. Each of these DEWS pages also contains upcoming events, as well as a table of ongoing activities in the region related to drought early warning. These are activities that NIDIS is participating in, but also that all of our partners are participating in. And you can easily filter search to learn more about what activities are going on right now, what efforts are ongoing to support drought early warning for the California and Nevada region. These pages also contain a curated list of resources, data, maps, tools, documents. As you can see, we've got a preview of several key data, maps, and tools that are especially useful for the region that our drought information coordinators like Amanda have picked out. These resources are organized according to different key components of an effective drought early warning system, like observation and monitoring, prediction and forecasting, and planning and preparedness. And finally, each of these pages contains a list of partners for that region that we work with. Overall, we've tried to make it really easy to find constantly updated drought information about current conditions, forecasts, drought impacts, and more, no matter what geographic scale you're working with, from the city and county level to the regional and watershed level to the national and global level as well. The second key new feature of the new drought.gov that I want to highlight for you are the interactive data and maps and new ways of displaying drought data that allow users to easily visualize and share drought information. One of the questions we get asked often is, how does this current drought in my region, whether that's county or state level, compare to historical conditions for that region? And our historical data and conditions page can help with that. This page displays 3 historical drought data sets side by side with an interactive graph and map, as well as a legend showing the percent area of the US in different levels of drought at a given time. These data sets, we have the US Drought Monitor going back to the year 2000. We also have standardized precipitation index data from NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information going back to the year 1895, as well as paleoclimate data, which takes tree ring reconstructions and instrumental data and blends them to estimate the average drought conditions each summer, going back to the year 0 for some regions of the United States. And these data sets have not been displayed side by side in a visual and interactive way before. We've tried to make this really easy to find exactly what you need for your specific geographic region. You can jump to a specific time period to zoom in on that period. You can move this cursor to select another time period, and the map and statistics will update automatically. If you want to dig deeper, you can click on a state to load that state's historical information, and the graph, map, and legend will all update automatically. If you want to dig down to the county level, you can also do that and easily load county historical drought information. Once you've found what you're looking for, you can download a screenshot of the map or panel, learn more about the different data sets and how they're come about, and download the data for yourself. Our data and map section contains current conditions, drought impacts, outlooks, forecasts, as well as data and maps organized around specific topics. So I'll just show you one brief example of one of our data and maps topic pages. So this is our snow drought data and maps page, and you'll notice at the top we have a link to our latest snow drought status update, which NIDIS and its partners produce every 4 weeks from December to June. Each of these pages contains a brief definition, as well as several featured maps at the top where you can view relevant drought information related to that topic. So for example, Julie talked about snow water equivalent, showing the amount of water in snowpack. So we've got 2 different maps here showing snow water equivalent as a percentage of normal conditions, both from SNOWTEL, from the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, as well as the Snow Data Assimilation System, or SNODAS. Each of these pages also contains several data maps and tools that are highlighted. You can click on any of these to learn more about the data sets, their documentation, and how to access them. Impacts of drought related to that topic, as well as web resources and research related to that topic. The last key feature of drought.gov that I want to highlight for you today is our brand new by sector section. Based on user feedback, we added this brand new section to the website to show drought's impacts on different economic sectors. Our goal is for these pages to serve as a landing page for people who work within or closely with each sector, from agricultural producers to public health professionals to wildfire management and more. Each of these pages contains a featured map or maps relevant to that sector. For example, here on our wildfire management page, we are pulling in active wildfire information from the National Wildfire Coordinating Group and have overlaid it on top of the current US Drought Monitor, as well as key statistics, a brief description of key issues related to drought's impacts on that sector, and a more in-depth background on drought's impacts on that economic sector. Finally, each of these pages contains a curated list of resources for promoting drought early warning within that sector, again, organized by these key components of a drought early warning system that Amanda mentioned earlier. Overall, the new drought.gov was designed so that users could have a clear path to get the information that they need to make decisions about drought for their local communities. So whether you want to explore drought by topic, by economic sector, or by geographic location down to the city or county level, our goal is to make it easy for you to find and share the information that you need to help your community better prepare for and mitigate the impacts of drought. We launched this new website a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, and we hope that you'll explore it for yourself and provide your feedback so that we can continue to make the site better and more useful for all of our users. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Kelsey. One question that came in along the way, and I think this is one I've heard before, and we were waiting for the launch to sort of address it, is how would we be able to use some of this data in ArcGIS? Can we integrate into programs such as ArcGIS Online?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are working on actually several maps in an ArcGIS site for our different sector maps for the different sectors. So we're working on an interactive ArcGIS site where users can turn on and off these different layers, view different data sets side by side, zoom in to different geographic regions. So that's something that we're working on as a future development. I also know that our development team has worked when we've pulled in all these different data sets to put them in a format that's easily usable by others. And I know that we are planning to provide a list of those so that others can make use of them as well, though we don't have that yet.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. There's 2 questions that go here together. One is asking specifically about California. There's ground sustainability agencies. If we had, for example, shapes similar to that, or can a user pick their own area in a map? I can answer these. And first, that we currently don't have ground sustainability agencies in our shapes because it's very specific to California. Right now, we're just going down to shapes that are available everywhere. And if I'm correct, Kelsey's like people can't quite, there's no data on the drought.gov itself that they can choose their own shape or area, but we do work heavily with a tool called Climate Engine, which does show you some of these type of data, and you can actually go choose your own shape, polygon, etc. So I'd recommend folks, if you would follow up with me or just go straight to that tool, and you might be able to play with some of similar data to this and draw your own little boundaries and areas. And they have things like BLM permit areas and tribal lands and things like that on the tool.
Yes,
Kelsey, is there anything you would add to that?
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. So right now, we've kind of have some preset locations. You can zoom in on the county, city, state, DEWS region, or watershed level. We do have a page devoted to drought and tribal nations, which has tribal nation boundaries in the US overlaid on top of the drought monitor. But yes, Climate Engine is a great resource that we are actually using to pull in a number of the maps that we have on the website currently.
And someone's asked for the link. I'll send it through the chat to everyone here as we keep going along the way here.
Yes, and
I think that's it for questions, Kelsey.
Yes, and I'll also send it through the chat, the email, which you can submit feedback. If you have feedback as you explore the new website or questions, we do have a help email at drought.portal@noaa.gov, as well as a website feedback survey on the website. So we appreciate your feedback and your comments, and I'll put that in the chat. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. I'm going to pop up my slides real quick here. And just a few more comments I'd like to say before we sort of see if there's any remaining questions or wrap back up here. Sorry, 1 second. For some reason, it's not letting me show my screen.
Hold on, I'll change. I think.
Yeah, for some reason, there it is. It took away my option to show my screen, which never has happened before. Here we go. Pop this up. Yeah, so just one last little bit here before we close out the webinar, and I'll tell folks again where they can find the recording. That was a remaining question we had as well here. As Kelsey mentioned, there's many places on the site that and many of our partner sites as well to talk about where can you report drought conditions and drought impacts. And one of the main ones is the Condition Monitor Observer Report. So here I just want to remind folks here for the URL here and also to submit your observations to here, because it really does help those with the US Drought Monitor, those at the state level, those at the local level, sort of have some of those on the ground feedback and information to see what folks are hearing. You can enter information there describing what's happening, comparing to previous years, and also give a comparison of what you think the level of dryness is and things like that. So we just want to reiterate this because it really does help sort of as we follow along with the drought to see what specifically is going on in areas. And so I just want to encourage folks to enter reports and enter them regularly, weekly, etc. as we move along here. It helps both if we move deeper into drought and also as we come out of drought in certain areas or have any alleviation to sort of know some of this information. With that, just sort of a few last things before I go back to questions. Thank you all to both Kelsey and Julie for your great presentations. The recording of this webinar will be available on the NIDIS YouTube channel as well as on drought.gov later this week on the event page for this webinar. Our next webinar, because we hold these every 2 months, is scheduled for March 22nd. And some of you who get our emails regularly know we've been doing drought status updates. The next one is scheduled for early February. So it should sort of go right towards the end of some of these systems and storms that keep coming in through the area. I also encourage you again to visit the new drought.gov. Kelsey was great showing some of the California state pages, the regional county pages. You're also able to see there's a California page, there's a Nevada page, visit the drought early warning system pages, and feel free to contact us or get in touch with us if you're interested in becoming more involved with the drought early warning system or things like that. I'm going back to the last few questions. I think we're pretty good on questions. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us on our webinar today and go ahead and wrap it. And thank you, Julie and Kelsey.